People who've been kidnapped. How did you survive? I was 12 when a man in a blue pickup truck pulled up next to me while I was walking home from school. He asked if I wanted to earn $20 helping him move boxes. My parents had always warned me about strangers, but $20 seemed like a fortune to a kid who got $5 allowance. The moment I got in his truck, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. He immediately locked the doors and started driving in the opposite direction of where he said we were going. When I asked where we were headed, he told me to shut up and sit still. He drove for what felt like hours to a small cabin in the woods. No neighbors, no cell towers, nothing but trees. He dragged me inside and tied me to a chair in what looked like a basement. The smell was awful, like something had died down there. For the first 2 days, he barely spoke to me except to bring stale bread and warm water. I cried constantly, begging him to let me go home. He just stared at me with these cold, empty eyes and said my parents probably hadn't even noticed I was gone yet. On the third day, he made a mistake. He left his phone on the table while he went upstairs to make himself lunch. I could hear him moving around in the kitchen above me. The rope around my wrists had loosened slightly from struggling, and I managed to work one hand free. I grabbed his phone and called the first number I could think of, my mom's work number that she'd made me memorize for emergencies. When she answered, I whispered as quietly as I could, "Mom, I've been kidnapped. I'm in a cabin somewhere. There are tall pine trees everywhere, and I can hear a train in the distance." Before I could say more, I heard his footsteps coming down the stairs. I quickly put the phone back and got my hand back in the rope just as he appeared. He looked at me suspiciously, but didn't seem to notice anything different. What I didn't know was that my mom had immediately called the police while staying on the line. They traced the call and started searching for cabins near train tracks in our area. Meanwhile, she kept calling his phone every few minutes, hoping I'd answer. The next morning, he seemed agitated. He kept looking out the windows and pacing around the cabin. I realized later that police helicopters had been circling the area, getting closer to finding us. He started talking about moving me somewhere else, which terrified me. That afternoon, he went outside to load something into his truck. I heard him talking to someone on the phone, getting angry. While he was distracted, I noticed he'd left the basement door unlocked. This was my chance. I quietly climbed the stairs and saw him through the window, still arguing on the phone by his truck. The front door was about 15 feet away. I knew I had to be smart about this. If I ran straight out, he'd see me immediately. Instead, I crawled on my hands and knees toward the back of the cabin. There was a small window near the floor that looked like it might be big enough for me to squeeze through. I managed to push it open and wiggle through, scraping my arms and legs on the frame. Once outside, I ran as fast as I could toward the sound of the train tracks. I figured if I could reach them, I might find help or at least know which direction led back to civilization. My legs felt like jelly from being tied up for days, but pure adrenaline kept me moving. After running for about 10 minutes, I heard dogs barking in the distance. Then I heard voices calling my name. It was the search and rescue team my mom had called in. I screamed as loud as I could and kept running toward the voices. A police officer found me about half a mile from the cabin. I was crying so hard I could barely speak, but I managed to tell him about the man in the blue truck. They caught him trying to flee the scene 20 minutes later. During the trial, I learned he'd been watching me for weeks, following my route home from school. He'd done this to other kids too, but I was the first one who'd managed to escape. The phone call to my mom and the fact that I'd remembered details about the location helped them find me before it was too late. I'm 24 now, and I still check every room before I go to sleep, but I also know that sometimes the smallest details can save your life. Memorizing phone numbers, staying calm enough to notice your surroundings, and never giving up hope that someone is looking for you.